coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
The new world order does not mean surrendering our national sovereignty or forfeiting our interests.
Opportunity to fulfill the long-held promise of a new world order where brutality will go unrewarded
Hello, Austin, Texas. We're back. As we promised, we got a very special show here tonight. We have with us, and we'll get to him just a second here, a couple of Mount Carmel survivors, and we're also going to have play some footage not before seen at 9 o'clock. So if you all want to come down to ACTV and meet our guest here tonight, you're more than welcome to do that. If you're watching channel 46 on Fort Worth, Texas, we're being cable cast out of Fort Worth now as well. We're a non-copyrighted program. Feel free to use any information on this program for the viewing audience of Fort Worth. Now let me just briefly bring up our guest here today. We have first over here to my far left, we have a young lady that was actually the one that brought out the tape that Mr. Koresh asked to be played on primetime radio, Miss Catherine Matteson, and to my immediate left here, Mr. Clive Doyle, who spent the whole 51 days in the Mount Carmel facility. And if you all don't mind, if you would, just go ahead and kind of, I guess, just give an opening statement or something before we get into some of the specifics. Catherine, or do you want to give an opening statement, or do you just want to?
Well, I can say I'm glad to be here. I'll be willing to answer any questions anyone asks. We're very anxious for people to understand the truth and understand the kind of people that were in our home at New Mount Carmel Center. And so that's about it.
How long were you consider yourself a Branch Davidian, Catherine?
Well, I was at Mount Carmel when Ben Roden and Lois Roden was there. In fact, I worked for them. And so I've been many years at Mount Carmel. It was the reason I came to Texas from Arizona.
Okay, Clive, I know you stayed the whole 51 days there. You unfortunately and sadly lost an 18-year-old daughter there in Mount Carmel on the day of the fire. If you would, if you could just give an opening statement. Or.
Well, I'm pleased to be here. We've been on the show before, and I'm glad that you invited me back. Wherever our concern is that the truth gets out to as many people as possible. We have a real concern for those that are still in prison, that are being held unjustly, having been found innocent by a jury. And if you have any questions on what took place 3.5 years ago, or what you may have some questions about what's been happening lately, we'd be glad to get into that.
Well, we're going to get into that. So let's just start from the. Now, if there's anything you all want to include, that's fine. But let's just start just briefly with some of the beliefs of the Branch Davidians. Time before you became famous, so to speak. Unfortunately, famous, but.
Well, we take the Bible as our creed. We believe that the Bible is basically literal, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, going to be literally fulfilled, especially the prophecies that talk about the last days. The only thing that we do not take literal would be where the Bible uses symbolic terms, beasts and things like that, which have an interpreted meaning. Some of our basic beliefs were that the law of God is still in effect. God's people should honor that law. Many churches, of course, believe that it was nailed to the cross, but we hold that it continues on to this day. We also believe that...
Well, let me just interrupt for a minute. I also believe that.
Okay.
So I assume then you all don't eat pork and shellfish,
No.
Right.
Saturday Sabbaths, and the whole thing.
If God says it's unclean, we feel it's unclean.
Right.
He has a reason for...
I agree with you, and I've been following them laws for about 3 years myself. But go ahead, Clive.
Another one of our basic beliefs is the fact that many of the prophecies of the Bible talk about God intervening in the affairs of men and bringing the world as we know it basically to an end, not doing away with it by devastation, but inserting his presence into this world and beginning to set up a kingdom. It tells us that in Daniel and in Revelation that God is going to come down basically and fight against the nations that have fought against his people, and he's eventually going to take the territory that they have usurped over the years and give it back to those that he calls his. And so that's been a major doctrine of ours for quite a number of years, since the mid-30s, that God would establish a kingdom beginning in the Holy Land with Jerusalem.
One thing that I happen to be a believer in up to a point, and that is that the other side of the coin, the Antichrist forces, will establish his kingdom, which I think's already been in place for quite a long time now. And we hear talk of this new world order that we talk about frequently on this show. And I know that I believe that you all have some feelings about that as well. This one world system that's being set up.
Right. We've known quite a bit about the overall picture of a one world order. We may have looked at it perhaps differently, not perhaps so politically as you all, but we've looked at it from a biblical point of view, and we see beasts illustrated in Revelation that would dominate the world and cause men to receive a mark and to obey, otherwise they're going to be killed, things like that. And of course, when you try to read and study these prophecies, you run into names and places and dates and so forth that back it up in history and in the affairs that are going on in the world today.
Beginning a briefing of reporters now in Waco, and let's go to that line.
The FBI did not return fire. Gas was inserted using a Mark V delivery system secured to a boom. Also, non-pyrotechnic delivery systems were utilized to insert CS gas. The occupants in the compound were advised, this is not an assault. Do not fire. If you fire, your fire will be returned. We are introducing non-lethal tear gas. Exit the compound now and follow instructions. Also, non-pyrotechnic delivery systems were utilized to insert CS gas. Come out now and you will not be harmed. You will be provided medical attention. Come out and you will be treated professionally. No one will be injured. Submit to proper authorities. No one will be injured. Submit to proper authorities.
That would dominate the world and cause men to receive a mark and to obey, otherwise they're going to be killed, things like that. And of course, when you try to read and study these prophecies, you run into names and places and dates and so forth that back it up in history and in the affairs that are going on in the world today.
Catherine, do you have anything to add to any of the beliefs?
Well, what came to my mind is the fact that when you read Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, you find out that Satan is going to appear as a man. And people are going to look at him and say, is this the one that's made all that trouble for us? And he's going to be in a position that he's never been in before.
So you yourself also see this one world order?
Oh yes, that is something that's been going on since 1776, and people don't realize it. In fact, it goes farther back than that. It seems that in Solomon's time, who was a very wise man, he had the principles of the New World Order, but he was looking at it from God's perspective. The New World Order, in many respects, following the things that you would read in the Scriptures, that there will be one person that you are accountable to, and whatever is given as a law, you will have to follow. And of course, that's their ideas also. But of course, they're looking at it from man's point of view. And yet the Bible says, cease ye from man, whose breath is in his nostrils. Who is he?
Very important to our effectiveness, I think.
Let's go to New York City. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hello, Ms. Burkhalter. I want to commend you for the magnificent work you're doing. My name is Pierre Lorsi. I'm a trial attorney, and I've used your publication to win some Haitian 243H, the asylum cases. Now, I'm so lucky. I got right through to the Secretary of the Army 4 years ago, and this is the second time I called, and I'd like to ask you the same question and the commentary. It's kind of my solution to the whole thing. And if I may have a follow-up, but it's a big question. Here's my solution. I don't know if anybody else is working on it, but I would do away with all national armies and have one international army drafted throughout the world, totally mixed. The purpose of it would be to enforce the findings of the World Court in Hague. I would also have all the judges internationally elected. Some of the problems giving up the sovereignty and are relatively obvious, but it seems to me with the New World Order, disarming, that this should be an ideal to work for. Is anybody doing it, or what are your thoughts on that?
All right.
Mr. Lorsi, with respect, I don't think that's a viable program for activists to work for. I think that given just the nature of the world system, and in our own country, for example, the hostility or the perception of hostility to even having the United States participate in the most minimal way in international peacekeeping, that the very idea of dissolving armies right and left is, while it is attractive in a utopian sense, is not a realistic program, and I think would be a waste of people's times. However, people of goodwill who share your goals and mine do have some things they could be working on. I think the United States should be taking the lead at the United Nations.
How many, okay, first question is, which one of you two were held against your will in Mount Carmel?
I didn't even want to come out. What do you mean against your will?
Well, we're just going to start it off with
we held no prisoners or captives. We had two young men that came in from outside during the siege that snuck in there through the FBI cordon that they had around us, and both of them left before it was over.
But even before the siege, I mean, anyone could basically join. You just had to kind of have the beliefs. You could leave when you wanted to.
David had the open door principle.
And this was for years and years and years, way before.
When he opened the door and saw all these men coming out with guns, he had the door open. He wanted them to not fire, but come in. And all they was interested in was shooting. And they did. And we weren't shooting at them because we were into shooting people, not with guns.
The very fact that over the years people have come and gone and you know, not been held against their will or tortured or any of this kind of stuff belies some of the statements that have been put out by the media or by the government,
right.
Or by even former members.
And another thing too is I understand a lot of you all had jobs.
Right.
Oh yes.
I mean, the people, they were hard-working people that contributed their time to the church, because some of their resources to the church.
Well, before the very end, yes, that, you know, we had one girl who was a linguist. She worked in Canada, and she was actually an overseer of all the school system, to see that they what she set up was done in the school system, and she more or less controlled that. She also worked for the United Nations because she was very good in French and other languages. We had a lawyer in our midst had men who were very, like one young man, he was very good as on computer. That's before computers became so popular.
Was that
there were a
Wayne
lot of people
Martin?
came from England, and they were social workers.
Right.
They had excellent. Most of our people were very well educated, and you know, in order to teach somebody something, you have to have people who are willing to be taught and have learned how to study, have learned to listen and evaluate. And we had people like that with us. And so all this about us being so, they never did say illiterate, but they called us many other things.
Yeah.
Were untrue.
Clive, do you have anything? Now, what was that? Was that Paul Jones, or there was a Jones? One fellow in there worked for the post office.
David Jones.
David Jones,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, but I know that you all had various. Was it Mike Schroeder, the one that got shot in the back, or when he was trying to run on the Mount
We had
Farm?
school teachers, and
These people all had good jobs.
Oh, they all had excellent jobs.
Wayne Martin was very well educated.
Wayne Martin was one of the most brilliant men I've ever talked with. He could talk on any subject. He was a professor. He was. He also was a lawyer. I did a lot of research with him. He was ultra polite. You know, I have worked for many men over the years in different positions and offices and different places. I never worked for a man when you would suggest an idea who would not take it and run with it and go to the boss and make him think he had thought of it. He wasn't like that. He was really an exceptional person. But the others were too, in their own way. Every one of them had abilities.
And another thing too, there was, you know, there were initially the media tried to make it look like that this was a white separatist group. This was
a third.
This was a group of all different races, cultures, nationalities.
Black.
Right.
Right.
So that had to be dismissed.
We had
quick.
Chinese,
had
Japanese. We had people from
Philippines,
Australia. We had people from England. We had people from the what's the one near Australia?
New Zealand.
New Zealand. All over the country. I mean, Canada. We had them from everywhere. And like I say, there was Japanese, Chinese, and all different races. There was Indian as well as blacks, and just about Mexicans.
They were not just members, but we lived together.
No.
You know, we got along. That, to me...
I'm sure you had a little bit of infighting among them. I mean,
no.
There was some disagreement, but I've never seen so many different kinds of people get along so well, which to me indicates the Spirit of God working.
That's right.
We had something, they came to learn something, and what they came to learn and to find out was more important than all the quibbling and the squabbles and the daily little frustrations that might arise because of the situations that we lived in. They were all solved very readily and without any fistfights or anything like that. Most of the time we got along great.
You never saw the men. You know, you'd expect the men to get, you know, when they would really get upset to start wanting to fight. There was none of that. The women, you know, it's very hard for women to live together.
Yeah, and you all did.
And
How many
yet
people were
we
totally
all lived together. I think the highest count was 150.
That was during '92.
Yeah.
By the time that the ATF raided the place, I think there was something like about 130.
How many square feet was that? Do you know? Do you have how many acres? There were several hundred acres.
Well, we have 77 acres out there, but the building wasn't...
yeah.
It was a big building.
And it was virtually paid.
Counted.
It was going to be paid for completely, right?
I counted 44. I sat down and counted 44 rooms that people used. But a lot of those rooms had 2 and 3 and 4 people in, depending.
Now this was built from church donations, right? People that worked outside.
First we used the wood from the houses that were originally there. Then we bought lumber that we had to.
Does that look? Well, let's go right into then. I want each of you to comment on this. February 28, 1993, I heard about this through the media. You know, it was, you know, right off the bat I was suspicious. Okay.
Right.
Tell us about each individually. Tell us about the raid by the VATF, February 28, 1993. What were you doing, and how did you perceive what was happening? Either one of you can.
You want to go first?
Okay. There had been Rodriguez was his name, wasn't it? Brought newspapers in. And then one of the men went out and got some more newspapers so we could all read it. The newspapers were everybody came down to read it. And so the newspapers were all taken apart, and, you know, people were reading different sections of it because there was an article running by the paper that was talking about David. And, of course, they were given their point of view. Well, I went down there, and I could, you know, I was trying to read it, and then I decided, no, I'll wait till everybody finishes, and then I'll get the paper, and I'll go upstairs and read it. So I ran upstairs to my room. I didn't stay there very long. When I came down, everyone had dissipated, gone to their own rooms, and I hunted around and picked up the different sections to finish the article. And as we had two big windows in the foyer, and I was in the far window, and as I looked out, I saw these vehicles coming in. And I start from my room, and I look out the second window, and when I do, I see that they're coming in, and I knew they would not go down the road because there was nothing down there. I could see that they were going to stop in front. There's two big cattle trailers. And I wondered, what in the world are the men going to do with those? Because lots of times the men would have something that they would be doing, and the women would not be absolutely conscious of everything they were doing at the time.
You thought it was Branch Davidians?
Oh, yes. I thought it was somebody had gone out and got these two big cattle trailers for a reason. And so I ran up the back way to my room, and I threw the papers on my bed, and I was about to lay down when I heard this terrific noise. I knew it was helicopters. I went to the window, because I was in the back of the building. And I looked out, and when I did, I saw these three helicopters in V formation. And actually, they were heading toward the end of the building, the north side, and the big water tower that was still standing. And they were firing. And I know, I just stood there stunned, because I couldn't believe this was happening. You know, it's like looking at a movie and then realizing it's a reality. And they were firing at David's room. There was no other spot on the building that they could have hit at that particular time. And I stood there watching, and I could see the shooting, and I could hear it, and I knew what was going on. And then they started to turn. Well, they were between the second and the third floor, and I'm on the second floor. And I realized if they start to turn, I very likely am going to get hit. So I got down on the floor as they're turning, and then, of course, as they're turning, they're not firing until they get around a way, and then they start to shoot again. Now, there was no shooting before that. And then, apparently, I figured by the time they got to the front of the building, that's when all the shooting started in the front. But they had already hit our water tanks and killed...
Peter Jant?
No, Peter Jant was...
Winston Blake.
It was Winston Blake that was on his bed with a piece of toast in his hand.
Right.
And it had gone through the water tanks and went into his room. Jadine was up in her bed, she was at the second tier, and she was on the second floor down from my room, and she had just given her baby to her older daughter, and when she got shot and killed in bed. And after that, it was just shooting, and everybody hit the floor. All the women took the children and put them under them. And I kept thinking, they're going to come over that roof. You know, if I had come in and attacked a place, that's where I would have come. It was the most vulnerable spot. because that roof was only about 3 feet at the most to the bottom of the windows. And the windows were open. And I thought they were along where our rooms were, and then went along the hallway. And I thought, surely somebody's going to try it. So I kept looking at that, and they kept yelling at me to get down, because one of the girls that was doing the screaming at me to get down, she said, "You're going to get hit," because she could feel the bullets going through her hair, and she's laying on the floor. How I didn't get hit, I don't know. Anyway, that's what was going on at that particular time. Nobody moved. Even when I left, the women were still on the floor with the children, because we had no idea whether they were going to come back or not. And they kept it up for about 45 minutes.
Clive, do you want to go ahead and remember back?
I was going to go back a little bit further than what Catherine started with, and that is that the media and of course the government have put out this idea that we were expecting this attack or this siege or whatever, and that we were all busily arming ourselves and waiting in ambush for them when they drove in. Just recently, the insurance company out of Atlanta for the Cox newspaper syndicate paid off the ATF in the court case they had against the Waco newspaper and the local TV station Channel 10. They were suing them, saying that they had tipped us off and that we knew they were coming and we were prepared for them. And so to take you back a little bit further, we actually knew that something was going on 2 months before February 28th, but we didn't know who was involved, and we didn't know what it was all about. All we knew was that there were some men that had moved into the house across the street that were acting very strange. They were shooting out in the backyard of their house. Their windows were always dark at night, even though we knew they were there. A lot of strange things going on. They didn't bring any suitcases with clothes and things like that. And so we kind of felt that we were perhaps being watched. I think probably the biggest idea that came to most people's mind, well, maybe they belong to the immigration people, trying to see if there's any illegal immigrants, inside. And so this went on for almost like 6 or 7 weeks. And at some point in that observation that they were doing, they made contact. A couple of them came over and visited one day, and eventually it led to this ATF agent, which we found out what he was later, by the name of Robert Rodriguez, who said he wanted to start having Bible studies with David Koresh. And so he started to come over and visit. He'd come over for a couple of hours and maybe have a private Bible study with David and so on. But on the day before the raid, he had spent the whole day with us. He had come over, and it was a Saturday, and so we'd had our regular meetings, and he'd spent the whole day. And at the end of the day, he indicated that he had to leave town, but when he got back after several days, he wanted to move in with us if he could, if he'd be allowed, so that he could have, more studies and kind of just enter into the whole thing that we were involved in, the daily living and the Bible studies. So David welcomed him, says, fine. Unbeknownst to me, on the 28th, as Catherine mentioned, he shows up that morning with the second edition of this series that the newspaper was writing about us, or about David, called The Sinful Messiah. He had come out there with copies of this, and as I said, I didn't know that he'd even showed up that day because I wasn't expecting him to come back. And it was only probably because it was raining that day that most of the guys had not gone out to work. We'd had breakfast and basically were hanging around our rooms when at some point, and I'm not real sure of the time, it couldn't have been too much later than when Robert left, I guess. I heard some noise out in the cafeteria area. A lot of people, and there's kind of a hubbub going on. And so I went out there to see what was going on, and it was at that point that people were saying, well, we've just heard that something's going to happen, somebody's coming. And so about the time I walked in and became aware of this going on, David Koresh walked in from the other side into the kitchen area and basically confirmed that he just heard somebody was coming out. He says, and I want everybody to stay cool. He says, just go back to your rooms, and I'm going to go down to the front door and talk to them. And so I went back to my room. He went out the other way, down the hall toward the front door. And the next thing I heard was David's voice at the front door saying, hey, wait a minute, there's women and children in here. Let's talk about this. And all hell broke loose. There's just shots, just seemed like hundreds of shots coming in from the outside, in through the front door. And my immediate reaction was, my God, there's a massacre. Whoever went to the front door is bound to have been hit with all this fuselage of bullets that had come in. So I went running down the hall, and first person I came to was Perry Jones, who had dragged himself up the hall, several feet anyway, from the front door area. And he was screaming that he'd been shot, and he was clutching his stomach. And so I bent over him and was trying to console him, and I says, well, what happened? He says, well, they started shooting at the front door. He says that David got shot, I'm shot. So I said, well, hang in there for a minute. And I ran down to the front door expecting to see bodies all over the place. And to my surprise, there wasn't anyone there. I mean, the whole foyer area inside the front door was empty. But the whole the front wall was just riddled. The doors especially were just riddled with bullets, and some of the windows had been shot out. And so I ran back to Perry and helped him back to his room, put him on a bunk bed, went and tried to get him some pain pills because he was just screaming with the agony of the wounds he had. And somebody came to me about the time I put him down on the bed, and they says, well, Winston's dead, Winston Blake. And I said, well, where's he at? He said, he's up in his room. So I went up toward his room, and I could hear all this water running, and I thought, that's strange. What's causing that, And as I rounded the door into his room, Winston was laying on the floor in a pool of blood and water. And all this water was pouring through these holes at an angle into the room. The bullet holes were high on the outside and low as they came in. I thought, my God, they're shooting from helicopters or planes or something, And so just everything was turmoil. I mean, there was chaos. There was people screaming, and I end up running back down the hall, and Wayne Martin, that's the lawyer that we had out there, he was in the process of dialing 911 by the time I got down the other end of the hall from where I was staying. And he was calling the sheriff's department, and it took him 45 minutes to get a ceasefire. Well, excuse me, 45 minutes to get in contact with the ATF. He didn't even have contact with them. It took about 2.5 hours to get the thing stopped. And by that time, we found out that we had 5 on the inside dead, another 4 or 5 wounded. And because we were beginning to hear on the radio by that time that we knew that they were wounded on the other side too, the ATF. But throughout that shootout, I mean, it was a lot of firing at the beginning, and then it was more sporadic for the rest of the time. And when I had a break, you might say, from running back and forth with these 911 calls and checking on the wounded and that, I'd ask people, who's out there? Who's shooting? What's going on? Where are they? And I'd try to look out a window without exposing myself, and I couldn't see anybody. I never even saw an ATF agent until they all stood up to leave. You've probably seen that footage in the news where they got up, and I thought, my God, where'd they all come from? And it was traumatic. It was scary, and yet it was, actually, I thought, considering the women and the children and the people that were inside that were under this tremendous attack, this tremendous volley of firing, actually handled themselves very calmly, I thought, by and large. You know, I mean, that doesn't mean there wasn't any screaming. There was people in pain. There was people that were scared, but I thought they handled themselves pretty good. And they certainly were not involved in any ambush. When first time I ran upstairs, as Catherine said, here's the whole hallway in the second floor. With all, you know, you couldn't even get down the hall because the women were laying on top of the children trying to protect them. And but there were bullets coming up through the floor. They were coming down through the ceiling, through the walls, and you know, it was just nobody knew whether they were going to be next. You know, it was getting hit. Actually, it's a miracle that so few did receive gunshot wounds in there on that first go-round, you know.
I'd like to inject something, too. Clive went back a while, and I'd like to go back a while because we had, before the women all moved upstairs, they lived downstairs. A lot of them lived downstairs. They were in different areas, and the men were in different areas. And we had, David had a feeling that from what was being told him by people outside, that someone was going to come to try to get the children. So there was a rule made that the children would not go out unless they were accompanied by someone, some adult. And so when they went into the huge sandbox that we had, there was always a couple of adults there. The children had already been inspected by the women that had come from the government to see if they were being abused. And I talked to Joyce, and Joyce told me that they were not abused. They could see that. They were very intelligent. They answered every question. They were very polite, and they were exceptional children. So we knew that we weren't going to have a problem with the government about any of our children being abused. But a lot of the families outside who had heard all these terrible stories, we were afraid that some of them might come and try to take them, that something could happen so we'd lose the children. And David told us that the women were all going to live on the second floor with the children to protect them. The men were going to move down to the first floor. And that's when the shift came. That's what we really and truly expected, that someone was going to try to take our children away from us. And of course, they wanted to, but no one ever did. I also wanted to tell about when after the shooting stopped, I had tried to go and lay out in the hallway. Couldn't find a place to lay down. I mean, it was just covered with people. So I stayed in my room, and like I told you, I was always looking out that window. But when I did go downstairs, I passed some things out to the women after a while, and I'd gone downstairs, and Kathy Schroeder was filling everything she could find with water because we were losing our water. And that was when Winston had got shot. Well, I was down there, so I was helping her. And we took every available clean article, whatever it was, pan or bottle or anything, and filled them with water as much as we could, because we had running water in the kitchen. And I went down around. I didn't go too far because we still didn't know whether they were going to start shooting at us again. But as I went by the windows when I came out the 2nd of March. When I walked by all of the rooms, I could see all the glass on the floor. There was no panes of glass left in the windows. The Venetian blinds were all hanging on one side, and everything was in a total mess. And when I went downstairs and saw how that had been shot up, it was full of holes. The ceilings, the floors, the walls, the windows were out. It was really, we had been besieged. There was no other word for it.
Let me just mention, Catherine, that you, I want to get into the actual 51 days. I know that you this is significant that you were the one actually here. How were you volunteered? Were you bring out this? First off, there was a tape that David Koresh wanted you to bring out to play on primetime
Well,
radio.
David was laying upstairs on the second floor. He had got shot. Somebody came after me about 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what time I lay down, and told me that David wanted to see me, and I went downstairs, and he said, I want you to take this tape out. And I said, I don't want to go out. I want to stay right here. And he said, listen to her. Of course, everybody, all the women were sitting around. Listen to her. And then he started explaining to me. He said, I want you to take this out. He said, I want this to go, I want the world to know. I want this to go around so that people will understand what we're like. You know, he was so concerned. I know that at the time he was concerned that he might die and we might be left without anyone to help us. And of course that didn't happen. I have seen him come out of other accidents and things that happened to him miraculously. And it was a pure miracle. When I talked with there was 2 women that was taking care of his wound. And the nurse told me that the bullet went into his flesh, and there was a bone there, and it zagged, and then it zigged, and it went around that bone and came out the other side. Okay. And she said, I have never, the 2 women had been nurses for years and years, and they were in their 50s, 55, 60, something like that. And they said, I have never seen anything like it in my life. And I saw that a lot of indication of the blood that he had lost. And they said he'd lost so much blood, and that's why he was weak, and that's why he looked so white, and that's why he looked like he was dying. But his wrist and hand had been hit, and his side had been hit.
Let me ask you, what was, okay, we got to take a break here. You all see that we're getting, just briefly, do you already know what was on it? It was just like a kind of a hymn talking about what the kind of countering some of the demonization?
No. It was a study tape.
It was a study.
To give people an idea of what we believed.
Taking place, and everyone here is, of course, nervously awaiting the outcome. Building. Lots of armored vehicles moving back and forth outside the building, knocking holes in it. We have not seen any of the Branch Davidians, and we have not seen any federal agents anywhere in any of these pictures. Most of these are on our big lens cameras that can shoot over that 2-mile area.
Jim, I understand that you heard something that sounded like gunshots this morning, but it might in fact be something else altogether?
That's right. Flashbangs or stun grenades, perhaps, is what they were. We heard the first shots at about 6:30 Central Time, 2. Then we heard one later, and we've heard several more since. Those indeed could be stun grenades, which would be something they would use if they wanted to go in and get the people out. Other than that, we haven't seen it.
Jim, I read that these people might be gassed. Have you heard anything along those lines?
There are unconfirmed reports that gas has been thrown into the buildings, but those have not been confirmed yet.
What is going on now, Vicki? Good morning.
Good morning, Paula. Just minutes ago, we had some movement from inside the compound. There was a banner that was unfurled from one of the upper windows. We believe that banner reads, "We want our phone fixed." That may refer to something that happened early this morning, about 5:30 Central Time. Negotiators called into the compound. They told the person who answered the phone, "We are going to start gassing you if you don't come out." There was no movement. Apparently, negotiators say that person hung up the phone. At this point, seeing the banner, we don't know if that means the person hung up or if perhaps there is some trouble with the phone lines. What happened then was about a half hour later, just before first light, a tank moved very close to the compound and in fact knocked a gaping hole into the wall of the compound. Shortly after that, another tank moved in. That tank moved around to another side and pulled down what seemed to be an entire section of the wall. Not long after that, another tank pulled up. The back of the tank opened up. 3 federal agents got out and threw what appeared to be gas canisters inside of the compound. We saw some white smoke come billowing out after that. So apparently on this 51st day, federal agents' patience is running quite thin.
Vicki, I know that you've asked federal agents about what type of gas they're using, and they won't confirm it for you, but it appears as though it is very windy there. Do you have, or anybody have any way of knowing if this gas is really sort of seeping into the building or underneath it?
Sources had told me that the gas was going to be shot into the building, in through the windows. I imagine that these very, very high winds has caused them to have a change of plans such that they had to get very close and actually toss it in. What they have preferred to do the entire time as they were cleaning debris out, as they were getting the few people who have come out of the compound, what they have done is bring the tanks up, and they have used the tanks to shield them. They have stayed quite far back. But today they have actually gotten the closest we've ever seen them to the compound.
If in fact there is this underground network with, I guess, which federal agents have in fact confirmed underneath this housing, what do you suppose is the strategy behind
Paula, we understand that a tank has just gone through the front door of the compound, just gone through the front door right now. Yesterday, the tanks came along and they pushed all the old cars out of the front. They took away all the debris. There was a small wall in front of the front door. They knocked that wall down, and now just seconds ago, they have actually knocked down the front door. Now, to get back to your question about the underground tanker, we have understood all the way through that cult members were using some sort of underground, kind of a basement. They were using that for target practice. So I think what federal agents are afraid of is that once they were threatened with the gas going in, that cult members may have gone down underneath.
Okay, we've got about 3 minutes worth of pictures, and I want to go ahead and let Clive talk over what we're seeing here, and then we're going to go ahead and get to some phone calls. We've had callers online I'm holding for a long time. Okay, bring them up. Hello.
Hello.
You're on the air.
How you doing?
Good. You?
I'm doing okay. Good evening, Catherine.
Yeah.
Clive?
How do you do?
Good evening. I'd like to say this is something that I've been following for, I guess, since the day it kind of came to the attention of the public. And I followed it all the way through, and during my last year or so at college, I was the one that was very outspoken about the issue. And you get a pretty bad stigma placed on you when you side with the non-popular side.
Right.
And actually, does the name Stuart Wright ring a bell to you folks?
I've heard the name, yes.
He was at the hearings, wrote a book. He's a psychology, sociology professor.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't ring a bell to you too?
No, I think you said you heard the name, didn't you?
Yeah, I've heard the name. I don't know the man.
Okay, well...
Are you talking about now?
No, I mean, anything they've shown over the past few years. Do you watch the normal programming just to see what they're saying about it?
Yes, we do.
Like on Dateline this week, they reveal the truth about what happened in the compound, and then they show the Jules or some crap, giving a line about what happened in the compound. Do y'all watch those programs?
Sometimes we do, but I work during the day, so I don't always get to see all of them.
Tell you the truth, I'm kind of tired of it, of listening to the outside world tell me what it was like when I was there.
I agree. Yeah.
I can completely see where that would come in. How do you feel about the hearings?
I had some hopes going into the congressional hearings, since I appeared up there, that some good or at least the truth would come out. Those hopes were dashed basically because we saw the politics involved in both the congressional hearings and the Senate hearings. One side playing devil's advocate and so forth. But even when facts came out and individuals were exposed, you might say, as either perjuring themselves or admitting to certain things, nothing was ever done about it, and it certainly didn't help our friends who are still in prison. And so I'm a little upset over the hearings. I figure, you know, you almost get to the point where you figure it's a waste of time. About the only reason I keep talking to the people is that there are still plenty of people out there that don't know what went on and the truth of the matter, and you hope to reach, you might say, the grassroots audience. But as far as reaching the heart of those that were involved, such as the ATF or the FBI or politicians or whatever, it seems like it's just a game with them. Nothing good seems to come out of it, I'm afraid.
I would encourage you, Clive, to not, as we talked before the show, to not give up.
Well, I'm not giving up, but I'm just saying.
The world is so wicked right now that any little bit of righteousness that anybody can speak is, you know, we need. The world needs it. I think that there's no question that this whole world is.
Oh, I'll keep speaking as long as we've got people still locked up that were found innocent by a jury. I'll keep talking out, but you know, it does get discouraging when you see obvious, as I say, perjury in the court, and nothing ever gets done about the ones that are perpetrating.
Can't we just talk over?
No,
we gotta change. Okay, we got to change the tape out for. Okay, so we'll be back in what, about a minute? Okay, we'll be back in just a minute. We'll quick slate. We got to change the tape up for because this is going to be put back on 2 access channels.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
Most of these signs that you're seeing portrayed on the screen were put up by a lady who's basically a squatter out at Mount Carmel. She's set herself up out there to kind of take advantage of the tourist trade, and so she has a lot of signs, and a lot of them are misleading. She certainly has some wild stories that she tells people, and you know, a lot of them really need to be addressed.
Well, she's collected plenty of money.
That's why I said she's taking advantage.
That's right.
In fact, we got your daughter's little stone coming up here, Clive. I hope this isn't too tough on you.
No, that's fine.
What is all of this now?
This here was a trailer that a lady who was in her late 80s had been living in. She was not there on the day of the raid. David had sent most of the older ladies over to live about 5 miles away at a trailer because it had hot and cold running water, it had central heating and so forth, and Mount Carmel at that time was still pretty primitive. So leading up to the winter, he sent the ladies over there. So she wasn't there, but they rammed her trailer with the tanks.
Right there's...
That's my daughter, 18-year-old daughter that died in a fire. That's David Koresh's stone, yes. We just recently learned that they stole one of his children's stones just in the last couple of weeks. You invariably get tourists taking souvenirs. That's one of the motorcycles. Just about all the guys that were there, David had bought the motorcycles. We had a trailer that we put right there. You're seeing the razor wire that they had all around us. A lot of people want to know why we didn't come right out. Yeah, we had a barbed wire fence around us for one thing. It's one of the reasons.
Well, that razor wire was worse than any barbed wire fence.
Oh, well, no.
I did not realize what razor wire was until I went back on Mount Carmel and saw it, and I thought, I could hardly believe that they'd use a thing like that.
This is one of the buses that we had that was dragged down toward the lake, and about 8 months after the fire, somebody came and torched it. Both of the buses that we've had out there have been torched since April 19th, 93.
Well, the big bus was in perfect condition.
This is a lot of the concrete from the foundations of the building that the ATF and the ATF and the private contractors have scooped up. What you're seeing there, that hole in the ground, is the beginning of a tunnel that came out of the bus that was buried underground. That's the only tunnel in the whole place, in spite of all the stories you've heard. There's only one tunnel that led into our storm shelter that we were in the process of building. There were no tunnels that led away from the building. There was no possibility of anybody escaping through tunnels or anything like that.
They said we had tunnels running to the houses. There's no such thing. We didn't need tunnels. We were close to one another. The houses were close. They weren't far apart. And we were close to
the white building you just saw used